Welcome, everyone. First off, thank you to ZEDEDA for putting this together. Yesterday was awesome, and so far the session this morning was great. It wants me to go back to coding. But before we get into the meat of the session, maybe we can go around and introduce ourselves. We have, I think, 25 minutes, so 30 seconds or less. Who you are, where do you work, and what do you do there? Maybe, Shuli, we can start with you.
Sure. My name is Shuli Goodman. I'm the executive director of Linux Foundation Energy, or LF Energy. And I would also add to where are you physically? I am in Sonoma County, California. And as I've been saying, I've got fire nipping at my heels that's going dry. So I think probably has a lot to do with the urgency that we feel, and I feel urgent. So I am really glad to be doing this. I really like all the work that everyone is doing, and thank you very much, Hans and ZEDEDA, for making this possible.
Thank you, Shuli. Johan?
Hi, I'm Johan Krebbers. I'm out of Europe. I'm The Hague in the Netherlands. It's evening for me over here. And I'm here on behalf of the OSDU Forum to talk about OSDU, an energy platform we're going to talk about in a moment. Thank you.
All right. Jonathan?
Hey, I'm Jonathan Wise. I'm the VP of Technology at an institute called CESMII, the Clean Energy Smart Manufacturing Innovation Institute. I'm outside of Cleveland, Ohio, although we're headquartered in LA.
Great. Frédéric?
Hello, everyone. I'm Frédéric Desbiens. I manage IoT and edge computing programs at the Eclipse Foundation. And essentially, my job is two things. First, keep an eye on 50 plus open source projects in the space. And the other half is really getting out there to evangelize the technology and build the community around those great projects, and obviously work with other organizations interested in furthering the cause of open source in IoT and edge.
All right. Jason.
Yeah. Hey guys. Jason Shepard. I lead the ecosystem efforts at ZEDEDA. I've been working in open source for a number of years. Helped get the EdgeX Foundry project bootstrapped, which then rolled into LF Edge. I now sit as the board chair for LF Edge, and obviously working with all of you guys and exploring opportunities on how do we collaborate, and so we can all kind of focus on the value versus the and avoid reinvention. Or as I like to say, undifferentiated heavy lifting. So really great to be building relationships with you guys and others in the community. So appreciate you joining.
Thank you, Jason. And I'm Harinderpal Hanspal, just Hans. Most people call me Hans. I'm with Momenta. We're a venture firm investing in digital industry startups in a number of industrial areas, including manufacturing, energy. So I'm looking forward to this. In my spare time, I also run a IoT meetup here in Seattle, which is where I'm based. It's now virtual. And I think we're almost at 4,300 members. And in fact, we started this conversation, Jonathan, Jason, and I, a few months ago when we hosted Jonathan. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today. So what I'd like to do is just start by getting an idea of each of the individual organizations and looking at what does accelerating the edge mean to each of the organizations before we talk about collaborating and open source. So Shuli, you could start with you. Tell us a little bit about LF Energy and some of the macro challenges you're addressing in the community, and how does edge play into that, and how does accelerating it help LF Energy?
Absolutely, thanks. So, if I were to describe what it is that I think we're doing, we're all of us, the whole planet's on a plane, and we've got an engine, and that engine is driving our economies, and we have to actually swap out the engine while we're on the plane and not crash. So that in and of itself is probably kind of the context for this conversation. What I love about everybody in this group is I think we have a very, what I see emerging is a pretty clear and productive understanding of the what and the how. which is that, if I were, Johan, you and I have spent hours talking. Yep. Jason, you and I have talked. Jonathan, we've never met, but the Eclipse Foundation, I've sat on many panels. What I understand is that we are all pretty much thinking about this the same way, that there's the edge and infrastructure, there's the data spaces, and then there's the application catalogs. The fact that we are beginning to actually converge on that, from my perspective, is absolutely the most hopeful thing possible. And so I think that I would describe maybe the biggest problem that I face is that there is still an enormous amount of investment in terms of capital and human energy and human power that is being invested in kind of the old engine and trying to eke out whatever profits from the fossil fuel industry. And so it's really incumbent upon us to recognize, we were talking before, just amongst ourselves, that we actually have run the clock on this. We are beginning to see actually the shifts in climate very profoundly, whether it's the floods in Germany, the floods in China, the floods in Japan, the fires on the West Coast, the fact that water is being cut from Arizona or New Mexico. So it's like we clock. I think that unless there is an application that is very specific to power systems, I see us at LF Energy actually leveraging the work of your foundations and your efforts. So that part is really exciting. So the architecture, the next steps, and I would also, I guess I would add one more thing that I think we're all going to have to learn to keep our wits about us. Because depending on where you're sitting in relationship to climate collapse, it's going to be complicated. And from that perspective, really creating cultures of kindness, of integrity, joy, love, and those are not necessarily things you would think of when you were thinking about the edge. So I want to find a way to work with all of your foundations and work together so that we can really activate that edge, figure out how to create the data spaces so that we can build the application catalogs that will allow us to network electrons, not physically network electrons, but the metadata about electrons. And that is where I think the great opportunity is. And the challenges are we have a very fragmented energy and power market. So harmonizing that, and kind of removing the restraining forces of the previous paradigm, I think are two of the most and biggest challenges we face. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, swapping the engine while we're driving is it sounds like a very scary thing, but yeah, we got to do it. Johan, so I'm, as somebody who's been in the tech industry for a while, familiar with the Open Group, but I wasn't familiar with OSDU. Maybe you can share a little bit about the background and what it's been like for you guys to use open source or leverage.
Thank you very much. We started OSDU, which is really an open energy data platform, about 2 years ago. We started in a non-open source environment, and we changed in 2019 to make a fully open source environment. And what we're trying to do with OSDU, really make it an energy platform for any type of energy source, like the older ones, but also clearly the new ones we spoke about a moment ago, and bring that data together. We create a data platform, an open source data, where the data comes together, because the data is the basis for all the activities we do, as you just heard as well. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So on top of the data, you have your application. What we're doing is with about 220 members out there. So we quite a large community out there, creating that open source data platform with the energy data from your wind farm, from your solar farms, from the hydrogen, from the CCUS, but also with traditional energy sources into the single data platform to help the energy companies to optimize their provisioning out there. And because it's from a cloud-based environment, but Edge plays quite an important role here, And that's why we also we really went after the edge as well in an open source context, with Eve, with Flex, etc., to really support. Because if you look at this environment, you will have edge requirements with your wind farms, with your solar farms, with your CCUS, with your drilling environment for each of them. But all of them are slightly different. Mm-hmm. So your application portfolio is very different for each of these environments. So it needs to be very, very flexible. But you want to make sure you have a single platform, a single environment, but on top of that, the application is very suited for the environment you operate. Because you really want to simplify the environment and make it very flexible. So open source is very important because you have very many different setups, many different interfaces you need. So that flexibility and speed of action, like we see there with Eve and Flex, is really what we need as well.
Great. Yeah, there's lots of different types of infrastructure. Much of it is not connected, so edge is important, right? Or not very well connected. Great. Jonathan, a little bit about CESMII. Important public-private effort. Maybe you can share a little bit about what CESMII is doing.
Yeah, I'm going to leave with the statement that CESMII is unique. We're quite unique. There's a dozen manufacturing USA institutes structured somewhat similar to what we are.
It's cutting in and out.
It's good on my end.
Yeah, it looks like on your end you come very, very choppy.
Yeah.
It might be better now.
Yeah.
I can keep trying.
Oh, no. Yeah, still chopping up. Maybe try dropping the video.
Sure. How's that?
Oh, very good. Okay.
Better.
Yeah. Bandwidth constrained.
Yeah.
So, CESMII is the manufacturing USA institutes, an array of different institutes created for different purposes. Our purpose is in the name, clean energy and smart manufacturing.
Sorry, Jonathan, it's still a bit choppy. Let me move on, and if you can figure out, I don't know what's going on with bandwidth, but
maybe I'll leave and come back.
Yeah, if you want to try that, that would work. All right, while we're waiting for Jonathan to come back, Frédéric, maybe you can talk a little bit about Eclipse.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the Eclipse Foundation has been around for a while, and most people still associate us with the IDE, right? Lots of people still use it, and lots of people love to hate it. Anyway, if you don't like it, that's fine. We have 400 plus other projects for you, right? One important thing that we do in the way that we operate is that we have a very strong decoupling between our open source projects and what we call working groups. The projects are really the property of their committers, right? The people that actually write the code. Whereas in our case, the working groups are really gatherings of organizations that want to come together, strategize, project a vision, that kind of stuff. And I'm responsible as a staff member to oversee 3 working groups. You see the logos behind me: Eclipse IoT, Edge Native, and Sparkplug. So in the edge space specifically, our approach is very much code first, in the sense that our way to contribute to the ecosystem and accelerate the adoption of edge technologies is really first by building our own projects and finding a place for them in the market. This is done all in the open. Anyone can join our community meetings and obviously contribute code to the platforms. But further down, the approach there is really to implement this vision where commercial entities can collaborate in the open source layer and build common features and drive forward, the state of the art. And at the same time, in due time, anything becomes a commodity. So if you are a commercial player, you need to innovate at the top of that. You don't want to reinvent the wheel. You want to focus on the differentiation at the top and the specific features and value add that you can bring to the market. So our game there is really to provide a vendor neutral level playing field for anyone that's interested in our platforms. And then when we don't have all the pieces necessarily in our own ecosystems, we are happy to work with the Linux Foundation, with the OMG and other groups in the space to discover possibilities for collaboration and cross-pollination of our technologies. And a good example of that, we've got the Eclipse IO Fog Edge platform. You can run EdgeX Foundry in containers on the top of that, for example, and some members' experience around this. Anyway, so our vision there is really pretty much code first, and what we call edge ops, in the sense that we are pretty much in our DNA a developer-centric organization. So we feel what's missing right now is the simplicity of use for developers, right? We have lots of incredible tools for infrastructure and Kubernetes and all sorts of platforms. And obviously EVOS from ZEDEDA is one critical component there. But, you know, there are lots of choices to be made and lots of complexity. So we try to streamline everything in a way that makes sense for developers.
Perfect. Thank you. Jonathan, welcome back. Do you want to give another shot?
Sure. Let's try it again. The sound.
Oh, nice.
Much better.
Yeah.
All right. So CESMII is one of the manufacturing USA institutes, all of which were created by the federal government to sort of improve the state of manufacturing technology here in the US. Our focus is in the name. It's clean energy and smart manufacturing. We've been around. We're in budget period 4, so that's a little bit more than 4 calendar years. And our goal, our mission really is to invest in innovation that can help move the needle on some of those goals. So there's a $70 million war chest from the Department of Energy that we are stewards of. And so we have a number of processes by which we solicit and select projects that we think are going to help with those goals. There's been sort of an evolution as the Institute has grown from probably the majority of the projects being heavily research focused, trying to look out 10 to 20 years, to maybe more of a sense of urgency around some more tactical investments and what can we do more quickly to help improve the effectiveness and efficiency of kind of operations here in the US. The supply chain constraints that we were all suddenly aware of during the pandemic are definitely part of the mix. So one of the things that we've done kind of strategically, other than maybe changing up the mix of the projects we invest in, is really taking a position and developing some opinions on open standards, including some open source technology that we want to advocate for. Rather than having many of these projects reinvent the wheel, we're trying to point them towards existing wheels where they can adopt or they can collaborate, or if there's something out there that doesn't quite meet their needs, they can extend or contribute to those efforts. So in the past year and a half, some of those opinions have crystallized, and there's now some requirements for projects that we're not going to invest in things that are maybe not as effective because they're pursuing the reinvention of the wheel. So collaborating with open source makes a ton of sense there. My role in the 2 years I've been there has evolved to participating in standards groups and working groups that are trying to settle on some of these things or harmonize some of them worldwide.
Great. Jason, so we know in the last 2 days we've learned a lot about ZEDEDA. Maybe you can talk a bit about LF Edge and that community and how you're approaching Edge and IoT.
Yeah, great. I know Roman talked a little bit about it this morning in the keynote session, so I don't want to use up too much time, just given the short period of the call. But yeah, LF Edge, very similar to CNCF. It's an umbrella organization within Linux Foundation, of course, focused on Edge and a series of projects. There's 10 today. It's a mix of more kind of software infrastructure, which would be like EVOS or Open Horizon, things like that, and then application infrastructure like EdgeX Foundry or Fledge or other projects. Secure device on board that was contributed by Intel would be kind of in the infrastructure realm, and certainly others. So for us, I mean, and we've been building a relationship with Eclipse and wanting to see whether it makes sense to kind of cross-pollinate, because as we're all saying, we're better off to focus on the value versus the middle. I always say you make your money on the IDs, security, manageability, usability, scalability, not like the basics. And then what's great about, as we started to work with the others, the organizations like CESMII and OSDU and LF Energy. LF Energy, of course, is part of Linux Foundation, but they have the end users and that domain knowledge that comes from the respective spaces. And that's critical when it comes to developing any types of solutions, is to make sure it fits into the various different industry contexts. Meanwhile, a lot of the different groups that have been doing really good stuff over the years, there is, and just people in general, there's concern over open source. I'm going to lose all my IP, or I have no way to differentiate. But the reality is, number one, the organizations like Linux Foundation and Eclipse provide that neutral ground to where and the right licensing, so you don't have to worry about it. But it also gives you more resources to spend on differentiation versus those basics. And so it's been a really good kind of learning process, I think, for all of us. Is like, where does it make sense to put your resources, and like what's the right way to collaborate? And the best way to vote in open source is keyboard, write code. But so it's been really good to work with everybody, and look forward to continuing to collaborate.
Yeah, no, that's great. And if you're not familiar with Manufacturing USA, you should check it out. There's, I think, 16 institutes under that, doing all kinds of research and essentially similar to CESMII in different areas. And it's I think, given that over 98% of manufacturers in the US have less than 500 employees, open source is going to need to play a key role in enabling them, right? We can't just have proprietary locked up system. So with that, maybe we can, I'll open up to the group. So what are some of the biggest misconceptions of open source collaboration, both positive and negative? You've all been working at different levels. What's your perspective on that? Who wants to go? Shuli, do you want to start?
Sure. I think a lot of times, sometimes I think the simplest way to talk about open source is that it's an intellectual property license that enables investment. In other words, you can put your time in, you can put your resources in, and be off with it. And so I kind of think of, the Linux Foundation projects sit in a series, and that series is protected by the Linux Foundation. And then the individual kind of communities is, where that investment takes place, and we build it. So oftentimes people will make it way more complex than it needs to be. In many ways, it's a legal contrivance that enables leveraged investment. And I think, what's a little bit different for LF Energy is that an industry-focused investment that my members are making, and that our footprint really is to go across. And in particular, we have a deep relationship with LF Networking, with LF Edge, with Hyperledger, with LFAI, with CNCF, because all of those things are going to be critical and important in order to be able to compose the future. I think the fact that we are converging on an understanding of actually what the stack looks like is a really good thing. So, and I think that the biggest misconception after, what is this legal contrivance part, is about security. And particularly when you're in the critical infrastructure world, and you're looking at, for instance, real-time telemetry in which, because the grid requires the balancing of supply and demand, voltage, power quality, all these things that are very technical and based on the physical world, I think that folks have a concern, if we do this, it's going to blow everything up. Or that we're going to hack our critical infrastructure systems and the grid is going to get pulled down. I think it's the exact opposite. And probably I'm going to guess that most of us here do feel like that. We may have different business models, but I think ultimately we believe that, with enough eyeballs, all security is shallow, shallow problem. So I see a lot of accelerated emphasis happening right now in terms of making the point about security. We've had enough security issues that have come up in the last 12 to 18 months that it's put it in all of our view, and the executive orders that have come out about security really are underscoring there really is only one path forward. Black boxes and proprietary software are going to be very problematic if we are going to move at the speed of the urgency, and which is why I opened with the urgency. It's like we have to move fast. Open source is sort of the way to do it.
Can I pile onto that one, Hans?
Yeah, go for it.
Please.
The amount of solutions that we see in manufacturing that are homegrown, we used to call it shadow IT. I think that's a little too derogatory. I'm in favor of creative problem solving, but this notion that we understand our manufacturing problem best and therefore we're going to build this software in-house. And then like comparing that to a stack that exists in open source and feeling that your in-house creation is safer or higher quality or more secure. Frankly, it's crazy because the level of code review you have on an open source project already makes anything that your two guys in the back office can come up with.
Totally.
Not a reasonable starting position.
Yeah,
people
think
that one up,
it's open that anyone can get in and hack on it, which is not really how it works.
It's not how it works.
There's just
It's a misconception.
so many more eyeballs. The SLA to fix stuff is really fast because you have so many people that are able to kind of contribute. But yeah, other thoughts, and I just put in the chat. We can go a couple minutes over because there's we're not going to get the virtual hook or anything, but I want to make sure that kind of get to everyone's thoughts.
Yep.
And certainly what you said, Jonathan, brings us to another misconception. I mean, people don't realize that, or have the impression they can write the code with the best, and that's not necessarily the case. But then not every open source project is the same, right? There are various flavors of open source, and some of them are better than others, right? Picking up a random library on GitHub, okay, it's great. You don't have to write it, but where is this come from? Are there patents that are violated in the code or anything like that? Has it been properly reviewed by others? How do they take external contributions, and do they maintain a level playing field? You are at the mercy of whoever random person put that on GitHub, right? So the second step is obviously to pick open source from reputable organizations, but we saw the problems where there's a single very strong player at the top that dictates the market. Yes, it's open source, but then they can shut down the community around it, right? At random. And this is why vendor neutral governance, like what the Linux Foundation is doing and its various subcomponents like LFNRG, LFH, and what we do at the Eclipse Foundation is so critical, because we have this level playing field where essentially every contributor is treated in the same way. And that's really essential. That's a critical condition for you to be able to contribute in a way that makes sense. And yes, consume the technology, but then being part of that community as well.
Yeah. I mean, we're trying to, with all of this, we're trying to change century-old industries, right? And it's going to take a collective effort, not one or two providers. So yeah, excellent. Johan, anything else to add to that?
Maybe some misconceptions. Well, like some of them, of course, people think about speed of open source is slower than in other environments, which is of course nonsense, because it's much faster, because you've got so many people work on it, but people overlook that. Decision making, people think it's slow, and again, it's the way you organize it is very important over there. And people come with, what about the innovation? And with open source, you have more innovation because you can focus innovation what really matters. So I mean, there's lots of misconception, but it's also quite funny, of course, because people once in an environment start contributing to things you never expect people would contribute to these environments as well. So also very positive surprise in that whole space.
Yeah, once people start getting involved, if you're foreign to open source, you start to kind of realize what things you were holding on to that don't really make sense, and then you have more time to really do some cool stuff.
Yeah,
even proprietary stuff as well, because I mean the whole point is that people need to make money and have differentiation too. It's not about losing that, but yeah, no, that's totally agree. Preaching to the choir.
Yeah, so we're actually out of time. I had a couple of other questions as well. Maybe we can actually carry on a longer conversation at a meetup or organize a separate event, because I think this is an important topic, right? There's definitely a need to collaborate. But otherwise, I want to thank everyone for this session. And if you have any questions, I assume you can reach out to any other folks if you have follow-ups. And otherwise, thank you very much. And thank you, ZEDEDA, for putting this together.